On October 19th, 2021, the quiet town of Kettering in Northamptonshire, UK, was shaken by the shocking discovery of Marta Chmieleka's tragic death. Marta, a 31-year-old woman from Poland, was described by her family and friends as kind, vibrant, and full of life. But behind the closed doors of a modest home on Wood Street, a heartbreaking mystery unfolded. In this video, we take you through. This is not just a crime story. It's the story of a daughter, sister, and friend whose life was cut short. Her case left an indelible mark on Northamptonshire and continued to raise questions about safety, trust, and justice. We step into a case that shook the quiet community of Northamptonshire, UK. A story both devastating and unforgettable. It is the story of Marta Chmieleka, a 31-year-old woman whose life ended far too soon, leaving behind a grieving family and a town haunted by questions. Picture this. October 19th, 2021. A crisp autumn afternoon in Kettering, a modest market town in Northamptonshire. On Wood Street, rows of small homes and guest houses hummed with ordinary life, children walking home from school, cars idling past, neighbours chatting at their gates. Then, just after midday, the stillness fractured. Northamptonshire police received a welfare call regarding one of the houses on Wood Street. Days had slipped by since Marta's relatives had last heard from her, and their unease had grown. Officers arrived, expecting perhaps a routine check. Instead, forcing entry into a rented room, they uncovered a grim discovery that would launch one of the most unsettling criminal investigations the area had ever seen. Marta was gone. The tiny, dishevelled space concealed dark secrets that would take years to unravel. What had happened here? Why had this remarkable young woman met such a tragic fate? As forensic teams moved in, neighbours stood in stunned silence while police cordoned off the street. Detectives homed in on a critical period. 4 days earlier, on October 15th, residents, like Andre Oliva, told reporters they had never witnessed anything like this in their town. Speechless was how fellow neighbour Marcus Jarman described the news. Wood Street had always been considered safe, a place untouched by serious crime. Now all investigators had was a name, Marta Chmieleka, and a mystery just beginning to unfold. Surveillance footage soon emerged as a cornerstone of the inquiry, helping to trace Marta's final movements. But who was she? Friends described her as vibrant, independent, and kind, a woman who left a mark on everyone she met. Marta grew up in Bydgoszcz, a bustling northern Polish city known for its riverside charm and tight-knit communities. Her family remembered her as extraordinary, always smiling, eager to lend a hand, whether carrying groceries for a neighbour or chatting for hours with friends over coffee. She had a rare ability to make people feel valued. At her inquest, Marta's brother and sister-in-law spoke of her as the glue of their family, someone who was simply there, ready to help without needing to be asked. She was especially close to her parents in Poland, and friends called her a daddy's girl. Not in a spoiled way, but because of the unshakable bond she shared with her father. She would ring him just to share the details of her day, and he took pride in the strong woman she was becoming. Marta also adored her role as an aunt. She listened to her nieces' stories, played games with them, and surprised them with little gifts. Her warmth, relatives said, made everyone around her feel cherished. In her mid-20s, while still in Poland, Marta met Marta Cmieleka. A few years older, he was charming, self-assured, and deeply passionate about cars, especially BMWs, which he loved to show off. Marta was drawn to his energy. At first, friends thought they were a perfect match. Her outgoing nature seemed to complement his quieter side. They bonded over music, weekend trips, and dreams of building a bigger life beyond Poland's borders. For Marta, ever curious, ambitious, and hopeful, the future seemed full of promise. Pavel was a companion who understood her want to investigate fresh frontiers. Their relationship progressed rapidly. After 2 years together, by 2016, they were prepared to go on. Marta and Pavel wed in a modest but happy ceremony in Bydgoszcz on July 29, 2016. Family, laughter, and Polish customs filled the day. Marta's family, particularly her father, who loved her, was overjoyed to witness her joy. The couple created a routine and rented a home in Bydgoszcz, settling into married life. For a time, it seemed like the life Marta had imagined. Stable, full of love, and aimed towards a bright future. Marta and Pavel, however, had larger ambitions. Both desired a chance to develop, make more money, and experience a new culture beyond what Bydgoszcz could provide. They decided boldly in 2017. They would go to England. A small town in Northamptonshire, Kettering became their destination, since Marta's brother and his family had already settled there. The transfer was a leap of faith. They packed up their lives, bid emotional farewells to their families, and came to the UK with great expectations. Kettering, with its peaceful streets and tight-knit Polish community, seemed like a place where they could begin anew. They rented a house, investigated the city, and started building a new life. A local news report later said they liked their new house with outings, walks, and trips to pubs and restaurants, therefore catching those optimistic days. Initially, the relocation appeared to deepen their relationship. While Pavel also found work, Marta immersed herself in Kettering living, finding employment and forming friendships. Always prepared with a game or a gift, Marta would host dinners for her brother and his children, doting aunt. Posts on social media from the time revealed them grinning, arms around one another with captions on fresh experiences. Yet behind those carefully chosen times, fissures were developing. Pavel, who had always been somewhat possessive, began to display a controlling side Marta had not observed in Poland. He would ask why she was spending time with new friends, who she was with, and where she was going. Fiercely independent, Marta resented being micromanaged. She didn't want to merely exist in Pavel's shadow, she wanted to live her life. Pavel's envy increased as years passed. He was fanatical, not merely protective. Marta was flourishing in Kettering's Polish community, expanding her social circle, getting to know others, and regaining her self-assurance. Pavel, however, was unable to take it. He'd message her incessantly, wanting to know her intentions, and occasionally drop by uninvited at locations she was enjoying. Friends observed Marta to be less herself around him. Her typical glimmer faded. She would dismiss it, claiming Pavel was only stressed or acclimating to English life. But those near to her noticed the pressure. Marta's family later claimed she was always smiling, but they privately acknowledged she had told them about Pavel's conduct, suggesting conflicts that made her feel trapped. The tension became physical. It wasn't only emotional. Later, court documents showed 3 recorded occurrences of Pavel's violence against Marta. One in August 2020, another at Easter 2021, and a third in September 2021, just weeks before the disaster. These were not unique events. They were consistent. Strong-willed Marta began to dread the guy she'd formerly loved. She'd say to friends that his jealousy was suffocating her and that she no longer knew Pavel. Still, she remained, maybe wishing for change or sensing the burden of their shared past. Pavel's controlling actions went beyond their house. He'd harass Marta's friends, attempting to follow her whereabouts, and even stalked her, appearing at her job or hanging around outside locations she visited often. Their marriage was falling apart by mid-2020. Determined to start over, Marta relocated and located her own Kettering residence. Posting on social media about personal development, she was emerging from her shell. 5 days before her death, she posted a Polish-captioned image. Wasting years of life hoping for another person to change or grow is among the worst errors one can make. It was a daring statement, a declaration of her will to go on. Dating once more, she was building a new relationship with a work colleague and looking forward without Pavel. Pavel, though, was not ready to lose her. Even as she pulled away, he kept calling, texting, and trying to insert himself into her life. Marta messaged Pavel often, pleading with him to leave her alone. The police later looked into and discovered proof of Pavel's unrelenting pursuit. Refusing to believe Marta was finished, he sent messages ranging from pleading to threatening. Her family, particularly her brother and sister-in-law, saw her increasing discomfort. She'd go see them, still the caring aunt to their children, but her eyes showed a weight. She was attempting to escape, but Pavel's shadow loomed large. Marta was at a crossroads as October 2021 drew closer. Talking about her aspirations with friends and planning a Christmas trip to Poland to see her father made her happier. Pavel's jealousy and control, however, were growing. The night of October 15th, when Marta was last seen alive, would show just how far he was ready to go to keep her in his control. What transpired in those last seconds? But how could a love that began with such hope turn to such gloom? Next, we'll discuss that. Marta was not only quitting a marriage, she was escaping from a cage. The breakup was a series of intentional actions rather than a single event. Marta started by avoiding locations where Pavel could appear, cutting contact and isolating herself. Living close by, she told her brother and sister-in-law about her intention to divorce Pavel in Poland, where their marriage was recorded. Already beginning to collect documents, a process calling for lawyer coordination, back in Bydgoszcz, she had started. Marta also relied on her friends in Kettering's Polish community who supported her, inviting her to dinners, gym workouts, or nights out. They would enable her to recover the happiness Pavel had dulled. Pavel, however, was not giving up. His jealousy, already a festering wound, became an obsession. Despite Marta's efforts to distance herself from him, Marta Chmieleka refused to accept the end of their relationship and kept in touch with her. Detective Superintendent Joe Banfield eventually remarked that Pavel's behavior became more frantic. He'd text and call Marta non-stop, sometimes pleading for another opportunity, other times charging her with treachery. He would call her friends or use other phones to pressure them for information on her plans if she blocked his number. Hoping to catch her off guard, he'd hang around her job or show up at her preferred cafes. Marta's friends saw her increasing discomfort. When out, she'd look back as though waiting for Pavel to show up. Pavel's actions became stalking. From a distance, he'd follow Marta, observing her movements, and once tracked her from her job to a friend's house, only departing when her friend confronted him. Marta said to her brother that Pavel was everywhere and she felt trapped. Marta was flourishing by October 2021, even under Pavel's shadow. Excited about her mother's visit to Kettering and relishing her new relationship, she was organizing a Christmas trip to Poland to see her father. Friday, October 15th, she spent the evening with friends, socializing, laughing, and texting at a nearby bar, sharing drinks. Dressed smartly, her normal confident self, she departed about 10:40 p.m. But that evening, something went wrong. Unlike her, Marta skipped work Monday, October 18th. Her co-workers, accustomed to her timeliness, sounded the alarm. Her brother became concerned when she failed to respond to his calls. The last straw was when Marta's family got a text from her phone that didn't sound like her. It was strangely formal, missing her typical warmth, as if someone else had composed it. Her sister-in-law, who knew something was very wrong, thought Powell was involved given his history of controlling behavior. She visited Powell's rented room on Wood Street Tuesday, October 19th. Her dread grew when no one opened the door. Reporting her worries for Marta's welfare and noting Powell's previous violence, she dialed 999. Responding fast, Northamptonshire police sent officers to the address for a welfare check. Their discovery was tragic. Breaking down the door, officers pushed into Powell's room. There, lifeless and covered in a blood-stained duvet, they found Marta's body. With defensive wounds on her right hand indicating she had fought back, she had 32 sharp force injuries, including neck, face, shoulder, and chest wounds. Beside her lay Powell, bleeding profusely from up to 9 self-inflicted throat wounds.
You got 60 seconds to open this door before I kick it down. Open the door! Powell! Stay there! He's got a knife in his neck.
Right away, police locked down the area and called for paramedics. Marta was pronounced dead at the scene of the crime. Her hopes for a new life were over. Powell was taken to the hospital right away, while he was still alive. Marta Chmieleka was arrested in his hospital bed on October 21st, after it was confirmed that his injuries did not pose a threat to his life. Throughout our investigation, Chmieleka refused to cooperate, Detective Superintendent Joe Banfield said, pointing out that Powell at first wouldn't admit that he had hit Marta. When asked what happened in that room, Powell didn't say anything when he was being questioned. Detectives asked him about Marta's last days, the strange text, and her absence from work, but he didn't say anything. His silence made things even stranger. Why did Marta spend the night in his room? Had Powell gotten her to go there? And what had caused such a terrible outcome? The police put together a chain of events. She hadn't been seen since October 15th, and her body had probably been in Powell's room for almost 4 days. As if nothing had happened, Powell had stayed with her body and gone about his business. A very important clue was the text message sent from Marta's phone, which showed Powell had tried to hide his tracks. Marta's family was broken, especially her brother and sister-in-law. They told her to stay away from Powell, but no one could have known how desperate he was. Now we'll talk about the important evidence that broke this true crime case wide open. The disturbing things Powell did with Marta's phone, the security camera footage, and the charges that followed. Proof was very important in the investigation into Marta's death, and the security camera footage from Wood Street and nearby areas was the most telling. Northamptonshire police looked through CCTV and Ring doorbell recordings that showed how Marta died in a very horrible way. On October 15th, 2021, Marta had a great time at her friend Daria's house in Woodlands Court, where she met new people and had a good time. She was flirting with Alexander, a co-worker she was dating, through texts, laughing, and jokes. She did answer a few texts from Powell, though, who wanted her to come over and even asked her to bring pizza. She yelled at him in a text message the day before and told him to leave her alone. Powell kept texting her and even called a friend. They both had to see if Marta was at Daria's. He saw his chance when he found out she was. Marta left Daria's at 10:42 p.m., and walked alone down Wood Street towards Rockingham Road. She was dressed for a night out and carrying a small bag when the video caught her moving. But a few minutes later, at 10:45 p.m, cameras caught Powell leaving the room he had rented and walking towards Bath Road, purposely blocking her path. Northamptonshire police later said that the video near Wilson Terrace showed Marta Chmieleka leaving his Wood Street address to find Marta. There was a fight caught on camera. Marta was walking normally at first, but she seemed to fight Powell when he grabbed her arm. She tripped and briefly fell down. She was seen coughing and wobbly on her feet. Ring doorbell audio picked up her hard coughs and Powell's cold, authoritative voice. "Come on, we're almost there. Do you hear me?" She was seen being frog-marched, and at one point he held her up in a bear hug while she ran. It was 10:56 p.m. when the grainy video showed them going into his house. That was the last time anyone other than Powell saw Marta alive. The timeline became less clear inside that room. But what Powell did with Marta's phone gave us important clues. At 11:01 p.m., only 5 minutes after they got in, Powell took a picture of Marta lying on the floor. It's not clear if she was hurt yet. About 90 minutes later, at around 12:30 a.m. on October 16th, he took pictures of messages on her phone that were between her and Alexander, confirming that she was dating Alexander. Powell did what he did because he was obsessed with Marta's new life, especially her relationship with Alexander. He did more than just look around. In order to hide his actions, Powell sent texts on Marta's phone. He sent texts to her family and friends in her voice to make it look like she was still alive. One message she sent to her family stood out because it was formal and not at all like Marta's usual warm and casual style. These messages were part of Powell's plan to avoid being caught, which bought him time while he spent almost 4 days in the room with Marta's body. The next day, he sent messages to men pretending to be Marta from her phone, trying to get them to have sexual encounters. 2 days after Marta's death, on October 17th, cameras caught him walking to a nearby store to buy 6 cans of beer and a soft drink. He then went back to his room without saying a word. He didn't seem upset. He just went about his daily routine at Kettering, while Marta's body lay wrapped in a bloody duvet. This video was very bad. It showed a man who could not only kill someone, but also go on with his life as if nothing had happened. At 10:56 p.m. on October 15th, Marta was last seen alive going into Powell's room. Detectives thought she died soon after, probably before midnight, because Powell took the picture at 11:01 p.m. and her 32 serious injuries were so bad. According to the autopsy, the stab wounds to her neck were the direct cause of her death. Once Powell was stable, he was arrested on October 21st. He was charged with murder, and there was a lot of proof, like CCTV footage, phone records, and forensic evidence. The prosecutors said he did it because he was jealous and didn't want to accept Marta's new life. Friends had heard him say that he couldn't stand the thought of someone else touching her, and that's what made him do what he did. By the time Marta Chmieleka admitted to killing Marta in Northampton Crown Court on March 3rd, 2022, the case was already a big deal in Kettering and beyond. Because he admitted guilt, there would not be a full trial. This saved Marta's family the pain of having to go through everything again in public court. Instead, the court moved to a sentencing hearing on September 6th, 2023. At this hearing, Powell's punishment was decided, and Marta's family and friends had a chance to talk about their grief. They were in the gallery with Marta's brother and sister-in-law. Their faces were sad as they waited to hear how much Pavel would pay for taking her life. Marta's family have requested that I read out the following statement on their behalf, and I shall do so now. Marta was exceptional. She was full of life. She was kind, cheerful, helpful, and smart. You never had to ask her for help. She was always just there for us, whatever we needed. She loved our children and was a fantastic auntie to them both. Marta was definitely a daddy's girl too. They had such a bond and such a loving relationship. After her death, her father began stuttering and now finds it very hard to communicate at all. He has really suffered, as have we all. Marta had so many plans and dreams. She was independent and confident, and we loved her so much. It's never going to be the same without her. Losing Marta has changed our whole lives. The prosecution, which was led by Northamptonshire Police and the Crown Prosecution Service, made a strong case for a harsh sentence. They said Pavel's actions were not a mistake he made on the spot, but the result of a pattern of controlling and obsessing over things. 7 of her wounds on her right hand were used as proof that she fought for her life. Those last moments of her life would have been utterly terrifying. Judge David Herbert later said, echoing the prosecution's story of a planned, vicious act caused by jealousy over Marta's new relationship. Pavel has a history of domestic violence, which the prosecution used to show how violent he was becoming. They used incidents from August 2020, Easter 2021, and September 2021 as examples. He went to the shop on Rockingham Road, where she worked, in 2020 and asked her about her relationships with other men. After taking her phone, he looked through it to find proof of cheating. It was then that Chmieleka punched Marta several times, giving her cuts and bruises on her face and back. She told the police what happened and later took back what she said. As part of a process to help the community get along, Chmieleka told his wife he was sorry. She broke up with him in September of that year, but he kept calling and texting her. The next year, at Easter 2021, he got angry at a family party and pushed her around. She was dead 3 months before he found her at the Warren pub. He put his arm around her and was scary to her. He was charged with harassment the following month. Marta was always scared and told her friends that she thought Pavel would kill her. She tried to get away from him by moving out, making plans for a divorce in Poland, and pleading with him to leave her alone. But he kept following her around and manipulating her, like when he sent her fake texts to avoid being caught. The prosecution's main point was that Pavel didn't feel bad about what he did. He stayed with Marta's body for almost 4 days while buying beer, and at first denied that he had abused Marta, trying to control the court process. They wanted Pavel to get a life sentence with a long minimum sentence, saying that his actions did not deserve any mercy. Given Pavel's guilty plea and the large amount of evidence, his defense team didn't have much room to move. With the 40-year-old's help, an interpreter, they agreed that his crime was very bad, but pushed for a shorter minimum sentence. They said Pavel did what he did because he was upset about the end of his marriage and Marta's new relationship. The defense said he was devastated by the breakup and used the wounds he caused himself as proof of his guilt or mental distress. They said that even though the attack was horrible, it wasn't planned ahead of time, and Pavel's guilty plea saved the family from having to go through a trial. But these arguments didn't hold up well against the prosecution's proof of Pavel's planned stalking and the brutality of the attack. Judge Herbert gave the verdict on September 6, 2023. Pavel Chmieleka was given a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years and 4 months in prison. The judge told Powell directly that the attack was long-lasting and vicious, and it was caused by anger and jealousy. He stressed Marta's fear by saying, "The evidence makes it clear that Marta did not feel safe with you and was afraid that you would kill her." The judge told Powell that he might never be free because his parole would depend on how dangerous the parole board thought he was to the public. Powell, who was 40 years old at the time of the crime, would have to wait until he was at least 58 years old to even apply for parole. This is a very long time that shows how bad the crime was. It had a huge effect on Marta's family. A heartbreaking statement was released by her brother and sister-in-law through Northamptonshire police. They were at the sentencing. The family's words made it clear that no sentence could take away their pain. But the verdict did bring some peace of mind, because Powell was found guilty. We have a question after reading this true crime story. How can we better keep people safe, like Marta, who fought so hard to be free? It took a lot of courage for her to leave an abusive relationship. Her hopes for a better future and love for her family remind us that lives are at stake in these situations. What can communities, the police, and each of us do to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else? That's it for today. If you found it thought-provoking, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay updated. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and as always, stay safe, stay smart, and keep seeking the truth.